Today in episode 63 of the podcast, we will be reviewing the film Novocaine and episode 3 of Daredevil Born Again. We'll also be giving a rundown of our time at the Lexington Comic and Toy Convention and talking about the biggest news of the week, including Ted Lasso 4 getting the official green light. And I'm Brad, he's Josh, and this is We'll Bring the Popcorn.
As always, before we jump into the news this week, please don't forget to give us a like and subscription on YouTube. Hit that notification bell so you're getting our episodes when they drop every single Monday. If you're listening to us in the audio realm, please don't forget to give us a 5-star review. It really helps elevate the profile of the show. And as always, please go to willbringthepopcorn.com where you can get access to our social media info, our archive episodes, as well as our merch store so you can continue to support the podcast in that way. We can't thank you enough for your continued support.
And so kicking off our news this week, we do have full confirmation that A Quiet Place 3 is in the works, and it looks like it's going to be kind of the finale to the main trilogy. Now, we got a spinoff where we got the, day one, we got the first day for Quiet Place, and I'm sure we'll probably have some more spinoffs, but, sure. They said they're returning to finish the trilogy.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. This has been kind of a surprise, horror hit. This is one that... I remember when it first came out, everybody was like, is this thing going to work? Are they actually quiet the entire movie? It works, though. It wound up working. It does such a good job of holding suspense and keeping your attention for, these several movies that we've gotten that I'm glad they're finally coming through and putting into the story finally, because I kind of wonder what the end game for this is going to be if they're going to finish the story. Does all of humanity get wiped out at this point, or do they find a way to completely overcome? Because if you remember where Quiet Place Part 2 left off is... they found ways to kind of stop these things, and do you think they build off of that and kind of have this big showdown with these monsters, or who ultimately wins out at the end of the day? I think is where I'm kind of wondering where they're going to go with it.
Yeah, because you don't know, are we going to get a happy ending? Is it going to be a more disaster ending? Because it kind of hasn't. I mean, you've had a decent amount of characters that have been safe, but it's killed off kids, it's killed off main characters, it's kind of had a lot of drama with the deaths and not always a happy ending with stuff. So it's going to be really interesting to see which direction they decide to go, because a lot of people looking at it, it's John Krasinski's first film that he had written and directed and stuff when the first Quiet Place came out, so he was still mostly known for The Office at that time, but he had other projects that were going and he had done some films, but Jim from The Office has written a horror movie where they're quiet for the whole film. How's it going to be? And it's been such a huge hit for him. There's a video game still in development based off of it and stuff too. So I'm really interested. I like the prequel. It could have done a little bit more just to kind of differentiate itself. It just kind of felt like another story done in a similar vein as the other two. But going back and finishing this trilogy out is going to be... I am really curious to see how they decide to end it, because they could go dark and bleak and end it on a really just dramatic, sad note.
Yeah, horror movies aren't exactly always known for their happiest of endings. It's always ending on a somber note, or somebody just winds up making it out. But when you deal with, you throw back to the classic Halloween, Friday the 13th type movies, do you really get a happy ending knowing that eventually Freddy comes back, or Jason comes back, or Michael Myers is coming back? They always come back. There's 18 of them, each of them at this point. They never completely go away. So, is it really a happy ending? Well, we don't know. There's still plenty of room for them to figure that out. But I'd be really curious to see the direction they wind up going for this final film, because there's a big confrontation coming. Do they mount an offensive now and find a way to just put an end to these monsters for good? Do we get any inclination of where they really come from? Do we know, all that is, are we meant to know that? Who knows? I'm interested to see how they put a kind of a ribbon and a bow on this story and kind of wrap it up,
Just seeing how widespread it is too, because it's been mainly in that New York area, but it'll be interesting to see, just, is it more off the coast? Is it all around the world? Do we get spinoffs where you're seeing stuff in Europe or something else? But because if one area with Quiet Place 3, do they find the solution kind of at the end of 2? Is that something they're going to be able to spread out to everybody, or does it turn out to be a Cloverfield sequel? Could we get a twist like that where there's something bigger that we hadn't even seen yet?
it could be, and it's interesting to see where they wind up going for that moving forward. But I want to move into our next story, which involves, a comic book that was created by Keanu Reeves, goes by the name of BRZRKR, is getting a film adaptation. It's going to be directed by Justin Lin. That's exciting news attached to that. If you don't know what BRZRKR is, it's a very dark, violent comic that kind of follows the story of this half man, half god who's kind of roaming the world for, several centuries. And I'm really excited to see this one come to the screen because I don't know if you've read any of it, but I've read a little bit of it, and it's very brutal and very violent and a lot of fun, and it's going to be fun to see how they bring this one to the big screen.
Yeah, when I saw Keanu was putting out a comic series, I got it set, so I had a pull set, so I got every single issue at home, and I haven't finished the last few of it, but it's dark, it's bloody, it's violent. It's going to be a lot of fun. It will star Keanu Reeves because if you've seen any of the comic, it is him.
Yeah.
So he set that up immediately, like, hey, I'm writing this comic. It's going to look like me. We're going to do, because I think there's actually a few different projects going on for BRZRKR, one that's animated and one that's live action. Of course, Justin Lin is handling the live action one with Keanu, but it's going to be really interesting to see how they turn out. That's going to make John Wick look like not like child's play. Like it's going to be so much more violent and crazy over the top than John Wick was, which it's going to be fun that he's going to have these. He's got his John Wick series, which John Wick 5 has been greenlit, but we still don't know if Keanu's going to be a part of it. But if he's got BRZRKR going on, I mean, he's getting up there in age. He's already talked about his knee surgeries and his knees and everything being able to hold up. So, BRZRKR could end up being one of the last big violent action series that he does, just because if it ends up being multiple films or a series or something else, that it could be one of the last big action ones he does.
Yeah, you kind of stole my thunder a little bit. I was gonna bring up the knees things. I think it's very interesting that he's gonna, obviously the comic books, he is the drawings that he he is the main character, so it makes sense he's playing it. But it's gonna be interesting to see him dive full on into. He talks about how much he struggles making the John Wick movies, but he's going to dive right into what might ultimately be a more physically challenging role for him. Like in this, I get it; it's a passion project, so he'll find a way to get through it, and you can get past some of it with stunt doubles and things like that. That he can kind of make that work. But it was interesting to see that he was talking about how difficult John Wick was, and now he's just ramping it up for BRZRKR, which is going to be fun. I'm excited for the live action one, but I'm also equally excited for the animated version of this because they can go even further with the animation than they can in real life, really, with how they want to make that. If they make an anime style BRZRKR, like that would be just insane. It's going to be a ton of fun to catch that as well. But it's fun to see both projects being made, and it's interesting with the John Wick getting greenlit as well because we got Ballerina coming up that a lot of us are looking forward to as well. And then you see how much, if any, John Wick is going to be a part of John Wick 5. You got a feeling if it's going to be a John Wick movie, Keanu's probably going to be a part of it. But with that ambiguous ending to part 4, we don't really know, where the story is going to be taking place or how involved in it he's going to be. But it'll be interesting to see where they take that story. But I'm excited for BRZRKR, man. That's a really cool comic that is going to get its live action adaptation. It helps when you have a star of the caliber of Keanu Reeves behind it. So getting that greenlit is pretty cool, but I'm excited to see what they do with it.
Yeah, Justin Lin lately, he's been doing a majority of the last Fast and the Furious films, so I think he is the director wrapping up the series since that's supposed to be ending after 376 films.
I think so.
Like, it's interesting they got him. Like, he knows how to do some action stuff, but the Fast and Furious series has been a little campy and over the top lately, so it's going to be really interesting to see what they end up doing if they keep BRZRKR being dark and gritty and kind of more serious than the Fast and Furious films have been lately, because you've got to look at what the director's been doing lately to see exactly kind of what they're going to do, but he knows how to handle a big spectacle, so sure. He'll be able to handle it. Just hopefully they get a good stunt coordinator that's in there and get that action going well, because it can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. I'm confident in him being able to do a full-scale version of this and it be high quality, especially with Keanu being as closely attached to it directly as much as he can be, and I'm sure he'll have a ton of input on this and how it's presented as well, so I'm confident that they'll put something pretty pretty cool together.
And so I want to head into a little bit smaller story. So Nicolas Cage has been working on his Spider-Noir series. You know, he, of course, voiced it in Into the Spider-Verse in the animated. He didn't show up in Across, so we have him doing the live action, and we have word that they're looking at doing a black and white version. So I guess the main is going to be color, but they will also release a black and white noir version, which after Godzilla -1 minus color and Logan Noir and all that, like it's been really fun to have these black and white versions, especially when you have Spider-Noir. You got to have a black and white version.
Yeah, if you're playing the we'll bring the popcorn drinking game at home, we got our Godzilla -1 minus color reference in. Do a shot. Anyway, yeah, I'm excited. Just give us the black and white version first. If you want to throw a color version of it in later,
that's kind of what I thought they were doing.
I'd rather they do it in reverse. It's Spider-Man Noir. It's meant to be like the comic. The comic book version of the character is in black and white. Just give us the black and white show, and then add a color version if you want to later. Like, it almost feels like, especially lately, when you get the full color versions of the shows, they're fine, but when you get them in the black and white version, it feels like they're better. You could say that with Logan. Like, the Logan movie was great, but Logan Noir was fantastic. Like, in the black and white version, it was so much darker and grittier, and it like just fit the story better. Obviously, with Godzilla -1 minus color, we felt the black and white version was much better and a better throwback to the old school feel of those Godzilla films. Give us Spider-Man Noir in black and white first. That's what I wish, but
I agree.
I have a feeling we're going to get the full color version first, and then eventually they'll put out the black and white version of it as well, which you got me, Amazon. I'll watch both, but like, I almost wish you can get the option of watching either or. I think that would be really cool if Amazon did that, but I have a feeling we're going to get the regular shot.
It would be nice if they released them at the same time, because I would 100% choose the black and white version first.
And I'm sure most people would too, and it would kind of, prove our point. But I'm excited to see the show because I've heard next to nothing about what's going to happen in this show. And I kind of like that. I kind of like not knowing what's coming, what they're going to give us, and it's kind of taking the story as it comes. So I'm excited to see, when eventually this comes out. I don't even think we have a release date set for it yet, but I think last I heard it was coming out at some point in 2026, if I'm not mistaken. Obviously, we're all waiting in the wings for Beyond the Spider-Verse, the next animated film to wrap up that trilogy for Miles Morales. And, it may not be the last we mention of Miles Morales in this episode, but we're waiting anxiously for that too. But this will be a nice stopgap in between then until they get the, finishing touches put on that, because obviously that film's not without its controversies. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just look into what's going on with some of the cast right now, and hopefully we get that done. But the Spider-Man Noir, black and white, I'm here for it all day.
Yeah, just give us a black and white version first. Do the color later, or have the option, because it's called Spider-Noir. You're taking what's meant to be an old 1930s detective Spider-Man that should be in that old gritty 1930s style, black and white. That should be the main version of it. Then the color version, kind of like what Marvel did with Werewolf at Night.
Yes.
You had the black and white launch first, and then they gave you the color later. And I enjoyed it in color, but I like the black and white better.
Yeah, it fits the aesthetic of the project that they're doing, and just give us the authentic version of it first, and then add the alternate version as well, and we'll consume both. We're not that difficult to please, but if we had a preference, that would be the preference for it. But like I said, I'm excited to see that story when it comes out.
Yeah, but you've got what Sony and Amazon doing this. It's not related to Marvel. We don't know if Marvel's had any hand in it or not. Yeah. We don't know if are they going to try to do any sort of tie-in with the Beyond the Spider-Verse at all, or if this is, we feel it's its own thing, but maybe there'll be a wink and a nod or something back to his involvement into the Spider-Verse, since you've got Nick, who voiced the character, coming to play him in live action. There might be a wink and a nod in there to it.
You would hope so, at least. I mean, I'm not exactly confident in, Sony's ability to handle these types of stories, judging by the movies we've gotten from them lately. But we'll see. I'm excited. I'm still excited to check it out and give it a chance, see what comes out of it, and we'll see if it's good. If it's not good, trust me, we'll tell you all about it, because I'm pretty sure we're gonna plan on watching that and talking about it when it does come out. So excited for that for sure. So I'm going to jump into our next news story of the week, which is, it's part of a project that I'm excited to see where they go with it. But Neill Blomkamp, who's kind of famous for directing movies like District 9, Chappie, Gran Turismo, got a lot of work in science fiction. He's going to be directing the new film adaptation of Starship Troopers that's going to be a little bit more faithful to the original novel. And Starship Troopers, we like to throw the word guilty pleasure around a lot. It's one of my favorite guilty pleasure science fiction movies. It's so crazy and violent and campy and over the top and humorous and just a really, really fun movie. I love the game Helldivers. It's got a lot of influence from Starship Troopers as well. Just excited to see what an actual film, a faithful film adaptation of this is going to look like. But getting, Neill attached to this is a nice director to get attached to this film for sure.
I only know the story from the original, so I didn't even realize it was based on a book. So it's going to be really interesting to see, because, it's a cult classic that's very much making fun and poking fun at the military and just how everyone out there obsessed with being citizens, and you have to serve to become a citizen to be able to have babies and anything else. And would you like to know more? Is probably the biggest thing that sticks with everybody's head. And you had Casper Van Dien, you had Neil Patrick Harris. It's definitely a huge cult classic. It actually still holds up really well visually.
Yes.
Like the special effects in that was ahead of its time. It got some kind of low budget sequels that spanned off of it and everything, but it's really interesting to see that they're going back to this well and hitting it again, especially the climate of everything it is, and getting Neil to do it. I mean, Elysium and District 9 and Chappie, he's done some of those very, I wouldn't call them eccentric, but very interesting, not your typical type of sci-fi. So he seems like a perfect fit to do the story, but that's based off of my knowledge of the original film and not exactly of the book. So it's going to be really interesting to see just how different it's going to be from that original. But I'll find myself at least once a year putting on Starship Troopers just because it's such a just fun, over-the-top, campy, silly, crazy. But it's another one that we've talked about a ton. Like a lot of these movies, when they came out, I watched them on, along with Police Academy and a bunch of others, I watched them on like Fox Saturday matinee showings where they've been edited for TV. So there's a lot of stuff I didn't realize was in the original Starship Troopers movie till I got older and was able to, watch the full version and not the cut for broadcast TV version. I'm like, oh, this is even more over the top and showing a lot more than I expected it to do.
I love hearing about your journey of watching some of these movies from a heavily edited version of TV. And I'm wondering how many people have a similar experience. Come to our Discord, come to our socials, and let us know what your viewing experience.
We didn't have cable until I was a teenager.
It's interesting to see like your take on some of these movies and how you consume them versus like how I did, where it was very much a weekly ritual at our house to go to the Blockbuster, rent a movie, whether it was, we're old enough to have lived through the VHS era and then, eventually transitioning to DVDs and Blu-rays. But, we would always go, and this was one that my dad and I, which, I can say it now because it's been long enough, but my dad would get these types of movies and let me watch them when I was younger, which might explain a few things about who I am as an adult now. But we would go and we would watch it. So I never got the broadcast version of any of these movies that you're talking about. So it's really funny because I have gone back and seen some of those cuts, and it's hilarious how watered down it is. So I'm very curious to see it. Like I'm always curious to hear your perspective on these types of things when it comes from seeing these movies in a heavily edited form versus a full version, and how very different the movie is from one version to the next. And it's always fun to hear your perspective on what changed. And I would almost love to do like a side episode on that, just talk about some of the movies you saw like heavily edited versus what the full version was and how you viewed the movie then versus you did when you actually got to see the full version of it. That'd be really fun to talk about.
As we did Blockbuster and Movie Gallery and rented a lot of movies and stuff, but of course my parents were a little bit more of checking the rating and making sure what it had in it before we did. But like I said, a lot of my movie watching as a kid was on Fox, where they just had movies playing all weekend long before they got big into sports and everything else. So it was, like watching all these different movies, and then I finally get to see the full version. I'm like, okay, these are vastly different than I remember watching as a kid because I didn't realize there was nudity in them. And some, like, you still got some of the violence, but
not as
it was
much.
more of the adult content part, especially like Police Academy having I always saw those as just the fun, campy comedies as a kid, watching them on the edited version, and then I finally saw the full version. I'm like, wait, there was nudity in this one? I'm like, okay. So it wasn't exactly at a sheltered, but it was just like, that's where I saw a lot of the movies was on that. Even, when we rented, we were getting a lot of the newer stuff. So by the time Blockbuster was really getting big, we weren't really renting those, which are a little more classic by the time,
Sure.
we started renting them. So yeah, a lot of it was just kind of almost seeing the film for the first time because of how heavily edited they were for TV, and they do water down some of these films.
They really do.
Huge to
They
make
really
them
do.
work. Of course, nowadays a lot more language, a lot more partial nudity and language and stuff, and violence is allowed even in like PG stuff. But back then it was back in our day,
it was
it was very heavily edited.
Yeah, but it's fun to see that perspective, and I guess that's kind of the advantage, if you can call it an advantage, growing up with divorced parents, where like my mom was definitely more strict with the stuff that I was allowed to watch and not allowed to watch, at least in her house. Than with my dad, he was renting Mortal Kombat and like doing all the other stuff, letting me get away with stuff I couldn't get away with. Shout out to my dad for that. But it's fun to see that perspective though, because just the different ways people like grow up consuming movies and how it shapes how you view things, and it's always fun to have that conversation about too. But yeah, I'm excited for this version of Starship Troopers just to see how much it differs from the one that we did get. If you're talking about making a more faithful adaptation, I'm going to have to read the book just to kind of get a frame of references, how different it was, because it was one that kind of came out when we were still relatively young and weren't comparing books to movies and things like that. So I definitely want to get my hands on a copy of the book and read it just to see how different it's going to be from the actual movie that we did get, and if it's going to be more faithful, what is that story going to look like? Because I don't have a frame of reference.
It'd be fun if we could get some cameos from the original cast in there.
I think we will. I think you'll get something of that nature.
Yeah, it would be a lot of fun. Just even if they're a throwaway, they're just walking in the background. It would just be fun for those who've. Because it's a cult classic, like it is. I think it gained so much more traction because there was a lot of controversy around it when it first came out, and it's definitely become more popular and more of a cult classic after it came out on home release and everything too. So it'll be really interesting to see if we do, like I said, Neill is probably the perfect choice. He was originally, he was actually going to do an Alien 5 film that ended up getting canceled on him, which I was really looking forward to see his, because he does have that unique style, unique storytelling that he's able to do through his films and stuff. So him and Starship Troopers seems like a perfect marriage.
Sounds good to me. I'm excited to see what he comes up with.
And so going into our next story, this was something I wasn't really expecting to hear, because if you've watched or listened to the podcast at all, you know our love for Kevin Conroy, for Batman the Animated Series, for his Batman, his Bruce Wayne, his legendary, iconic voice. And he passed away in 2022, but apparently the upcoming Devil May Cry anime series will feature a role with Kevin Conroy's voice. No AI, fully him. So this might possibly be, I mean, again, this is 3 years after his passing. We might have our final voice role from Kevin Conroy coming out.
It's going to be bittersweet, man. That guy has been a part of so many things. His voice is ingrained in core memories for me. Just like I said, we can't go on and on enough about how much we love Kevin Conroy. We miss Kevin Conroy, his unfortunate passing a couple years ago. But this is one that I'm excited to see. One, I love the Devil May Cry games anyway, so I'm excited to check out the anime series when it does come out. But you get one last gift from Kevin, man, and Kevin was an incredible voice actor. Just his voice is one of those, when you hear it, you know it. Like, if you know it's Kevin, you know that's Kevin Conroy. Like, there's... To consider yourself one of the all-time great voice actors is to have a voice that everybody instantly recognizes. And for us, like, growing up with those types of animated series and things like that, know the voice of Kevin Conroy. And I'm excited to see what role and what capacity he's a part of this show, and I'm going to watch and listen very intently for that.
Yes, we don't know if it's a 1 episode or 2-3 episode arc, or just how much he actually recorded for it, because again, it's been 3 years since he's passed, so you think it's been 4 years since he's recorded it. You don't know exactly kind of what kind of role it's going to be. They gave us a little bit of detail, but not really his importance of the role. But to hear Kevin's voice one more time is going to be, it's going to be cool, but bittersweet, because like I said, we've talked about a lot: Batman the animated series, Spider-Man the animated series, X-Men the animated series. Like, those shaped our childhood big time, and especially with Batman the animated series, Mark Hamill's Joker and Kevin Conroy's Batman are just ingrained in us. That is our just childhood. But that series still, and I'll rant and rave about it all the time, like, it was it was so much more than a kid's cartoon. It had depth, it had darkness, it had
It holds up.
an incredible amount of, especially going back as an adult and watching it again, it had so much more. Like one episode I didn't remember about, it was basically talking about suicide and everything else, and like, okay, I didn't really get that as a kid, and it was a lot deeper, darker, and had a lot more meaning to it than you expected. And yeah, it holds up so well. And just Kevin, his voice is Batman, his voice is Bruce Wayne, and everything. Of course, he reprised it for a lot of different animated movies and stuff they did, along with the Arkham series. You had his voice, so like when you think of Batman and Joker, it's Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill.
Yeah.
Those voices that define the 90s and define Batman after Michael Keaton and everything else. Like, it was Kevin Conroy, he's Batman.
Yeah, and, this is one that we're definitely looking forward to seeing it. And, obviously he is missed very deeply by us in all the projects we could have gotten from him, but we get one last appearance from the legend himself, and very, very much looking forward to that. So now I want to move on to a news story that's much more positive for us, for sure. And I think you and I would both put this show in our top 5 favorite series of all time. Ted Lasso is getting greenlit for season 4. We cannot stress how excited we are for this. It was a pleasant surprise to come out, and the way they kind of rolled out the announcement for it was just on point for Ted Lasso. It was so good. You get Jason Sudeikis coming back as Ted Lasso. You got Hannah Waddingham coming back as Rebecca. You have Brett Goldstein coming back to play one of my favorite TV characters of all time. And Roy Kent, just absolutely brilliantly written character. You get Juno Temple coming back as well. There's no word if Phil Dunstan's coming back as
it's looking
as
like
Jamie
he
Tart.
Probably won't, because he's got some other projects going on.
Yeah,
so,
but so happy that Ted Lasso is back and it's coming.
Yeah, and it makes kind of sense if some of the other players don't end up showing up, because we've got a little word on the story. So Jason Sudeikis was on the New Heights podcast and talked to Jason and Travis about it, and basically said, we're writing it right now. So we don't have all the story beats and elements worked out, but Ted is going to be coaching a women's team. So it seems like it's going to start in Kansas, where we kind of left him, but there is going to be something that brings him back. Of course, the women's team was kind of hinted at the end of season 3 as well. So it looks like we're going to be getting Ted returning back overseas and coaching a women's team, which is give a great new dynamic and stuff to it. It just, as we've talked with everything, especially with Shogun and all that, like, if you're coming back and you're going to do it, just make sure it makes sense and you're not doing it just for a cash in or whatever else. Like, so hopefully they find and have that good story that they felt was worth revisiting and coming back to these characters, because we did leave it in a pretty good place at season 3. Like, a lot was left open that you don't know exactly, is Ted and his ex-wife back together? Like, he's more part of his son's life, and is the women's team going to be enough to get him away from his son, or are they going to go over with him? Like, we don't really know those details, but it's something when you're so engrossed into that story and that world that you want to make sure that they're doing right by the characters if they're going to come back, because it has been a couple years now since we got season 3, and it did end really good. But to see Roy Kent again, Ted and Roy are two of the best characters that have been created in the last probably 10-15 years. Like, absolutely. Jason just fully embodied the mustache and what it was to be Ted, and gave us so much depth of just heart and humor, but also about depression and about anxiety and everything else, and just
layers.
Roy having much more layers than we ever expected him to have, which was just so hysterical, everything that he got to do. But to see the growth where he was going, like, it's just amazing cast, and I'm really looking forward to see what they do with 4. I just hope they, and I have a feeling especially with Brett being one of the writers and Jason being one of the writers, they're making sure that this story is going to be done right for them to want to revisit it.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the core of what made that show like as special as it is. Like, you have, obviously, Jamie might be the biggest omission from this, because he did have such an incredible story arc through the 3 seasons that we did get, because he went from being easily the most hated guy on the team to one of the most redeemable and beloved characters on the show. And, you still get Roy, you still get, Coach Ted, you'll get Coach Beard, I'm sure, is going to come back as well. But you have Jason and Brett, writing the show again. So the people that are attached to the show that wrote it for as long as they did are back to write it again. So it's not like you're getting somebody to come in and change the formula. You've got people that are so invested in the show, so attached to the characters, they know the story that they want to tell. It gives me better hope that it's going to be of a high quality, that, you know, they're going to take care of this show, and what we get is going to hopefully be really special. I'm excited to see how Ted interacts with, you know, the women's team this time, because he's gotten pretty good about getting through to the men's team, but we'll see how he does with the women's team this time. There's a fun new dynamic there, and, you know, we could get a whole new cast of characters. How does he relate to them? Can he relate to them? And it's going to be fun. I want to see the circumstances that bring him back to, you know, back to England this time to coach what's probably going to be the AFC Richmond women's team. I'm kind of jumping the gun a little bit on what I'm assuming is going to be, you know, the team that he's going to be coaching, but for reasons he'll get pulled back into it. But I'm excited, man. I'm excited to get these characters back. It's one of my favorite shows of all time. The fact that it did get left open-ended, like, I was happy with the ending, but it did what it needed to do and leave me wanting more. But in that way, it never really felt like a series finale. It just felt like a really good season finale.
And they refused to call it a series finale.
Correct.
As well.
And that's the little glimmer of hope that I've been holding on to for a minute now. And excited that we're finally getting into this. And I would love to see if they wrap up Ted's story in a meaningful way, whether it's one season of this or 2 seasons of this. I don't know how long beyond this current season we're going to be, and I don't want to project that forward, but so happy we're coming back to these characters in this story, and we're getting a 4th season out of this. I'm so excited.
Yeah, and I said it's going to be a little sad if we don't see Jamie show up, but we kind of left him and in a good place as well. But one of my favorite episodes is that bonding episode between Roy and Jamie of when they're riding bicycles and
one of the funniest
everything else. Ever. It was just, and even some of the stuff you knew was going to happen, like Roy just such random stuff of Roy just, they're pedaling the bikes and they're going down the road just fine. And then all of a sudden Roy just goes right off the side of the road and crashes. Like, there was such a great dynamic between those two, but you got to see such a great growth of Jamie and Roy throughout the series. And yeah, like I said, the biggest thing is, what are they going to do that makes Ted come back over? Because he chose his family in the end. So hopefully it's something like he's just not leaving his kids again. But again, we got Jason, we got Brett behind it. But yeah, Bill Lawrence created such a fantastic show. He created Scrubs, but he also created Shrinking, which, you know, talking about Ted Lasso brought up a little bit of news that I didn't put in our show notes today, is that Jeff Daniels has joined the cast of Shrinking Season 3, which might be the finale. So he kind of has this 3-season plan with some of his shows, but Jeff Daniels is going to be Jimmy's dad in Season 3 of Shrinking, which that's going to be fantastic. Of course, you know, he can do drama and comedy so well, and Shrinking, if you haven't watched it, can be very dramatic, but also very hysterical. But, you know, whatever Bill does, especially coming back to Ted Lasso Season 4 or Shrinking Season 3, if that's where that ends and stuff, I'm all aboard, because his shows manage to get you with a lot of humor and a lot of smart humor, but it can give you gut punches with the drama and the emotion and the effect that it has on you, because they're able to balance just so well just all those elements of just making it feel real, making these characters feel real to you, because you can relate with Ted and his anxiety and the depression and being away from his son and everything else. And you can relate to even Roy Kent, who's the hard-nosed guy that you get, but you start to see him softening up, and you get to see there's more depth and layers to him. Like, just such brilliant creation by Bill Lawrence with these 2 shows. But coming back again for Ted Lasso Season 4, maybe that'll mean Shrinking will get a Season 4 as well, because he kind of mentioned all of this is up to Apple. If Apple's willing to kind of pay for it and do it, that they'll come back and revisit these characters as long as everybody's on board for it.
Yeah, and those are 2 incredible shows, again, on Apple. My recommendation to people is to just pay for a month of Apple, go explore some of the shows they got on there. There's just so much good stuff on there that they do such a terrible job at advertising. Once again, if you're playing the Well Bring the Popcorn drinking game, or mentioning Apple's lack of marketing, do another shot. But those are 2 incredible shows. I'm glad that, you know, we're getting the next season of Shrinking as well. That's going to be exciting. And we were kind of talking about Ted Lasso, but Shrinking is an incredible show as well. That if you like Ted Lasso, give that show a shot as well.
You also get Brett Goldstein.
You
He's
get
a
Brett
writer
Goldstein
on it,
in it.
and he shows up in Shrinking in a
Very-
pivotal role.
In a very un-Roy Kent-like role, though.
Absolutely.
But it's a different version of Brett Goldstein for sure that he does a really good job in that show, especially in the second season with.
You get to see a lot more heart and a lot more drama out of him. Like
Yeah,
he really hits you in the feels in Shrinking.
Yeah, that one's got some incredible actors in it as well. So check out Shrinking too if you can. But yeah, Ted Lasso, I'm so happy. The way they rolled it out on social media was absolutely brilliant too. Like they reactivated the Ted
the Twitter
Lasso
account was
just like,
oh,
hey,
I finally found the password to
yeah,
this.
what did I miss kind of thing. And I'm just like, absolutely brilliant. You get the iconic AFC Richmond Stadium chair with the 4 written on it and all that stuff. And it was just really cool, really exciting stuff that they got to roll out and get everybody hyped again, because it's, like you said, it's one of our favorite shows of all time, and I'm excited to see the story continue with it.
And another show that is one of our favorites of all time, X-Men the Animated Series. We've talked about it a few times now that season 2 of X-Men 97 is not going to happen until 2026. But at a con this weekend, we got kind of word that we were kind of a little surprised about, is that season 3 is already going to start recording voices. So they're, I think next week this week when this episode drops, they're already going to start voice lines for season 3. So that should hopefully mean a much smaller gap in between season 2 and 3 than we did with season 1 and 2, since we're getting almost a 2-year gap in between 1 and 2.
I'm so excited for that. It's one of my favorite bits of news to come out this week, and it happened of all places to come at a convention. This is why we tell you, go to conventions, go to some of these Q&A panels. You'll find some interesting bits of news, and you can eventually find some of these nuggets that turn into bigger stories. And, Lenore Zahn that, let it slip that she was going into the booth to start recording voice work for season 3. Very exciting news. We're going to get a 2-year gap between seasons 1 and 2, but we may only get a 1-year gap between season 2 and season 3. I don't know. I don't know the release schedule yet, but excited that they're already going to do voice work on season 3. Just give us season 2 already, for the love of God.
Now.
Like, give it to us now. Like, I don't care what form it's in. Just give me the stories. I'm
just
so
storyboards with the voice.
Yeah, I'm good with that. I can make that work. I can play the animation in my head if I need to. But yeah, that's exciting news to come out of that. And we, go back in our archives and see, as we did the watch along for, X-Men 97, just to see how much enjoyment we got out of this. But I'm chomping at the bit to get that story continuing in season 2 and see where that story takes us. But the fact that they're already well ahead of that and working on season 3, that brings a lot of joy to me, knowing that we're not going to hopefully get as big a gap between seasons 2 and 3 for that.
Yeah, because it was kind of surprising that it was announced that it's not coming till 2026, because, we got animation takes a long time. Like we're well aware of that and everything, but a lot of these, when we're watching a season, they're already animating and working on the next seasons. Yeah. Like they have to work well ahead to keep up with everything. We know Invincible had a huge gap, and they've been trying to keep up with that as well, but yeah, we got that X-Men 97 season 1 in summer of 2024, and we won't see it until potentially summer 2026. So that's a big gap. So maybe we could even get season 3 in spring of 2027, so that we have not as maybe a 6-month gap instead of a 2-year gap.
I want it all, and I want it all right now. That's what I want from it. But no, I'm excited to see where they go with it, and excited that season 3 is kind of moving in that direction for sure. Now I want to move us into a discussion about our experience at the Lexington Comic and Toy Convention. Once again, thank you so much to the folks that run Lexington Comic and Toy Convention for giving us media access to this convention. We got to go down for a day, spend a day there, got to see some of the panels, walk around, kind of see the lay of the land. It was a really fun experience, and we got that experience with the Cincinnati Comic Expo, and now getting to go down to Lexington to see kind of a little bit of a different version of it and their take on it. In some ways, it was similar. In some ways, that are different. But what was your overall thoughts on the experience that we had with that?
I mean, it's a very large convention. It takes across 3 floors, and it's well laid out. I really liked how they did the celeb area, because you had bigger name badges that stuck out away from it, so you could be walking and looking straight down the aisles and see all the names without having to look at every single booth to try to find who is who. But I think they did a fantastic job. There's plenty of walking space. There's a lot of people there, but there's plenty of space to get around, and at the newly renovated area right next to Rupp Arena in Lexington. So there's plenty of space. It was easy to get in and out of it. Didn't have a lot of, but it was a lot of fun. Like, I really enjoyed the panels we got to sit on, because I'll go ahead and jump right into the Jason Isaacs panel that we sat in and be able to see, because, you know, most everybody knows him as Lucius Malfoy from Harry Potter, but he's in White Lotus, which he's been being talked about a lot for White Lotus right now because of what he bears in that show and everything else. So, but he's done a ton of different stuff, but it was really interesting to see his personality, because we hadn't met him or anything. And he was at the Cincy Comic Expo, but I think our schedules when we were trying to talk with different celebrities and do different panels didn't really line up. So we were able to sit in here to listen to him speak, and he was actually really hysterical. I did not expect him to be as funny as he was, because he just opened up talking about, you know, we're all just idiots. There's nothing special about us actors and stuff. We're all just idiots and stuff. You could ask me all this stuff, and I don't know. I'm just an idiot. Like, I don't know that stuff. And like, don't ask me this and don't ask me that. And like, because I've answered it so many times, and like, just brutally honest with a lot of stuff. But he did some nice depth on different stories for, you know, touched about Harry Potter a little bit, and there was a really fun story about how kind of Lucius got his look, which was really hysterical, because he said originally when he actually originally auditioned for
Gilderoy Lockhart.
Yeah, Lockhart, but he ended up getting Lucius, and they were showing him the different designs for the characters and stuff. He's like, well, I kind of pictured him with long hair, but he's like, well, Dumbledore has a wig. I'm like, can't have more than one wig. Well, his is really expensive. Like, just give me a long wig or something. It's like, I can't grow my hair out. I need a wig. And he's like, well, he's in a suit. I thought he'd have like big robes or something else. So he grabs like a curtain. So he just grabbing stuff off the shelves and covering himself in, and goes down to director Chris Columbus and, what are you doing? Are you wearing a rug? Are you wearing a curtain or something like that? Just, it was a pretty hysterical storytelling, kind of how he was able to help shape the character and what he looked like, but it was in a hysterical way that it wasn't what you really expected, and how it came about. Like, he's just pulling random stuff out of the prop department and costume department and put it on, and went and talked to the director. Like, this is kind of what I had an idea that the character should be.
I'm glad he spoke up for himself, because his look is very much iconic for Lucius Malfoy, and it's always interesting to see the story and hear the stories about how like stuff like that comes to be. One of my favorite things that he mentioned that was Potter specific was he got to improvise a line from the movie in Chamber of Secrets, where he first meets Harry Potter, and he mentions that the line that he tells Harry is like, or he mentions that, you know, something of the effect of, you know, just always happy that Harry Potter is going to be around to save the day. And he said Daniel Radcliffe, and his brilliance as a young actor, ad-libbed right back to him, "Don't worry, I will." It was a completely improvised interaction that wasn't in the script. And I was like, that is a really cool story.
It felt really natural too. So to have a kid that young to be able to improvise that quickly back to him,
which was a really cool moment. But yeah, Jason was brilliant, man. He was so funny. It was a pleasant surprise, because that was the first panel we got to be a part of that day, and just listening to him interact with people and just the playful banter that he had with people. It was so funny. Very, I want to say very British in his humor, because he is British, obviously, but he has a very British style of humor that just really makes me laugh. And
I love he immediately said, there are children in here, but I'm going to curse.
Yeah, he's just
they're fun.
Yeah.
I like them.
Yeah.
I'm going to curse.
He was so funny, man. It was so... Like, if you only know him as Lucius Malfoy, it's like a night and day difference between the actor and the role that he played, which goes to show like the level of talent that the man has. But he starts talking. He did spend a little bit of time on several of the projects that he had worked on that we, you know, you may have seen him in, you may not have seen him in, and you know, go look up his IMDb page and see like all the stuff that he's been in, because he's been in quite a bit more than you think he has, and. You know, just hearing him interact and tell stories was a really fun panel to be a part of. We got a lot of enjoyment out of that.
And there's one other Harry Potter tidbit I forgot to mention that was also interesting by him, because he also initiated the cane wand for Lucius, because he kind of said at that point they were thinking that the wands were just kind of going to poof in their hands, like they're just going to kind of appear out of nowhere. And he's like, no, I think Lucius should have a cane, that his wand is in the cane and stuff. And he was, that's also a huge part of Lucius there, that he was able to do that. But it was interesting to hear that they had a much different idea for how the wands were going to appear and be used in that film. But yeah, he was really hysterical. But he also had some good depth that he talked about, because someone asked him about, does he enjoy playing villains? And his answer, and because to me, it's really interesting to get inside the mind of an actor and see what really makes them approach a role. And he said, I'm not looking at them as villains. I'm seeing them as human beings. They might be tortured or have issues or problems or something else, but I'm looking at the human element and how I can explore their demons and the darkness or the light, or just I can explore their story to get something out of it. So I don't see them exactly as villains. I see the depth and the kind of interesting nature behind it. And said I've been lucky that I go after good writing. That's what I look for. Good characters that have been well written, that just makes me look good and stuff. But he's played a lot of good villains, but also some, really solid roles. But I know it probably perked you up as well when he started talking about it. He's a big comic book fan, and his number one character is Daredevil. And he told us a story about as a kid where he used to walk around like he was blind, smashing stuff up in his house because he was trying to be Daredevil.
I love that. Daredevil is one of my favorites as well, for obvious reasons.
Let's get him into Born Again.
Please, for the love of God, get him in the show. But he mentions that he is friends with Charlie Cox, so that's pretty cool. But he was just a breath of fresh air, man. It was such a fun panel to be a part of. He talked, like I said, about so many different projects he was in. Star Wars Rebels is another one that you and I both love, that he did some voices in that as well.
He even said, don't ask me about that kind of stuff because I don't remember it.
Right. He was very blunt about it, too. It was so fun because he was just like, don't ask me about this. Don't ask me about who I like to work with and who I didn't like to work with, because I'm gonna give you the easy answer every time. I love them all. But it was just like, even if they're idiots.
He's like, I've worked with some real jerks and people don't like, but I'm not going to say their name.
Yeah, he was very diplomatic about it in a very funny kind of de-arming kind of way. But he was a lot of fun to get to. But that wasn't the only panel that we got to, for that day. Our next panel took us down the hall a little bit, but we got to sit in with the legendary WWE tag team, the Hardy Boys. They did a Q&A. As a wrestling fan, I appreciate you giving me the time and space to go attend that. But we got to hear some fun stories from Matt and Jeff, too. It was almost exclusively a Q&A panel where fans just got to come in and ask them a bunch of questions they always wanted to ask them. But in typical Matt and Jeff fashion, they're very entertaining, very personable guys, and that was another really fun panel to be a part of.
And it's interesting to see, especially since, I was into wrestling when they were around with Edge and Christian and, the Hardy Boys and The Rock, and when they were all kind of starting in the Attitude Era. So, I was a part of their journey. So it was interesting to see them as the human beings, especially because I haven't been fully into wrestling a lot lately. And so the broken Matt Hardy that I've seen him and seeing some over top with that, and then seeing him just sit in the panel and being normal, and it's like, okay. He does a decent job of delete and being, broken Matt Hardy, because he just gets to be so over the top. And they told us some fun stories about how he came up with that. Like, he told nobody what he was going to do when he created Broken Matt Hardy, because it's like, well, we're going to set this up like you're going to knock me through some tables or something, and we're going to play it off like I got brain damage or something that's going to create this and that. And no one knew the voice he was going to do, the way he was going to speak, or anything else.
Not even his wife. It was pretty
Not even his wife. So he said it was a surprise to everybody when he broke that character out.
Yeah, but he talked about the different inspirations behind it, which if you've listened to any of his podcasts, he's gone and done in-depth to the methodology behind the character. He gave us a little bit of a glimpse of that too, but he did spend a lot of time, they did get a lot of questions. I got to ask them both a question. I asked them about what they like to do in their downtime when they're not wrestling, because they're still very busy. They've been in the wrestling business for over 30 years now. And, they're still going. They're still, the TNA tag team champions. They've just had a recent couple run-ins in the WWE. Now the WWE and TNA are kind of working together. They've had some crossover there. but they're still going. And
So AEW stuff as well that they're doing.
like they were in AEW for a hot minute after they left WWE. When they came back, it's a whole long list.
If there's been a wrestling organization out there, more than likely the Hardys have been in.
They've been there. They call themselves the greatest tag team in all of time and space, which is a lot of fun. But they show up everywhere. But they're still very much active, very much on the road. They are they're so personable with their fans that if you ever go to a convention that they're a part of, chances are they have one of, if not the longest line. Because I remember walking around with you after the panels and seeing like the celebrity row and stuff like that. They were the only celebrities at the convention to have a secondary line for themselves.
Yeah, it looked like their line doesn't look too bad, and then we walked on down on the right side. They're holding up a sign that said Hardys. I'm like,
and it's a longer line for there. You're like, oh, I get it. And I tell you that because they are notorious for making sure that everybody that goes to see them gets a personable interaction, gets to spend a couple minutes with them. They are notorious for staying well after their time allotted for those signings are to make sure everybody that's in line gets to have that interaction with them. They're one of the most popular tag teams of all time. But they got to tell some really funny WWE stories, some funny other wrestling stories as well. Like a lot of people know them mostly from their time in WWE, obviously, because it is, the biggest wrestling organization in the world. A lot of fun stories talking about some stuff like that. They got to talk about some of their music tastes as well. Jeff's notorious for being a musician as well, but Matt talked about his love for Public Enemy, for hip hop, for stuff like that. Got to talk about his family. Just a really cool panel to sit in and be a part of for sure.
And they had a crazy week coming up. They told us, like, yeah, we leave from here and we go home for a day and then we fly over here. Then we have another event. We go over here. Then we have another event. We go, like, they had like 6 events in 7 days or something to get to. So, like, they had an extremely busy schedule outside of the cons, like actually wrestling events they had to go to.
Yeah, their schedule was crazy because when they had the panel Sunday, they flew home Monday. On Tuesday, they were in New York at the theater at Madison Square Garden wrestling on WWE NXT television. Then they had to go, and they were a part of TNA just had a pay-per-view Friday night, and then wrestling tapings on Saturday. So they had, television tapings and a convention appearance that was tied to that over the weekend as well that they spent more time doing autographs. They're very, very, very busy guys.
They might have finally got some sleep today, maybe.
Maybe. You never know. But it's crazy to see the schedule that those guys stay on. Just mad respect to anybody in that line of work who is at that level of popularity that the schedule that those people are on, it's insane. But it's a lot of fun. And they're one of my favorite tag teams of all time. So, I've been fortunate enough to get to meet them and have my interactions with them. Matt actually followed me on Twitter after I posted about their panel. And Matt's just like one of the greatest guys, but it was a really cool panel to be a part of for sure.
Yeah, and we left that and we went over to the Twilight panel. So there was a Twilight reunion that happened at the Lexington convention here. So we had Maggie Grace and we had Jackson Rathbone and Peter Facinelli. Quite a lot of the cast other than, Kellen Lutz, other than the main 2 stars and stuff. And they were, kind of open and honest about everything. They talked about how ridiculous it was doing the running scenes where they're running on treadmills and how they hated that, but also talked about they would love to see their characters get more of the depth from the stories, get more of their backstories and everything. And Jackson Rathbone was the, hilarious comedic backbone to all of that. He was just so hysterical with everything he said, but he also came with kind of the best moment of that panel to me because there was a gentleman who said he's auditioning for Romeo and Juliet and asked for some pointers on someone who's trying to do. And I think Maggie Grace brought up watch the original back in, I think, the 1960s or 1930s version, and others were kind of making jokes as most of the panels are trying to have fun and do stuff with. And Jackson just came out, you've just got to, just came with such, I was expecting a joke, but he came out with some depth of like, just, focus and hone on your craft and just look at these characters that they were just these star-crossed lovers and all that, like just went into this deep emotional really talk about it to give him some really good advice on what it took. Cause the others were, they just watch this or do this or have fun with it and all that and good luck. But he went full out there that I did not expect. The gravitas of the information that he gave him was really, I think should be really beneficial to him.
Yeah, it was a really cool moment to have that, to see that interaction. We kind of got in on the back half of it. We weren't really intending on joining that panel, but we wound up getting in there and seeing kind of the back end of it and the back end of the Q&A, and it was really fun to hear some of the stories that they were telling about their time on it. One of my favorite little tidbits. I know we won't spend too long on it to get to the last panel that we did get to go to, but was one of the fans asking if they had any input on the fan fiction that was written about their characters and stuff. And to, I think, our surprise a little bit, they were aware of it, and they knew about, a good chunk of it, which is funny because a lot of people that are in those types of roles tend to stay away from stuff like that because it can be intense and it could be, what have you. But
well, a couple of them said they haven't read, but they've seen some of the pictures that's done. Yeah. I'm like, that's enough for me.
Yeah, but it was a really fun interaction and a question. But it was cool to see like some of them acknowledge that they had, and it's crazy when you get a part of a project like that is so insanely popular that it gets developed it develops the hardcore fan base that a project like Twilight does, because that was by far the heaviest attended panel of the day.
Yeah, it was.
That we had seen.
It
was
hit capacity.
Jam-packed. Like, I know we got to flash our press credentials a little bit just to get in there because we weren't going to be allowed.
I definitely didn't hold it up, and in my head, I'm saying it's okay. I'm a limo driver.
He got to have his limo driver moment. It was pretty funny, but we got this. Go in the back and stand and watch the last of it before the next panel. But that was really cool to see, how they interacted and just the grip that Twilight still has as, as strong of a hardcore fan base as it does. Because I know that was a series that you and I, for, one reason or another, just never really found ourselves too attached to.
I was, mainly because my wife got into the Twilight books and the series, so I've seen all the movies multiple times. I haven't read the books, but I've seen all the films.
You're not as emotionally connected.
I'm not emotionally connected to it. Yeah,
I wouldn't say you were a hardcore Twilight fan. You could be. I don't know. Are we gonna learn something about you today? Like what is going on here? But yeah, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah,
like, you don't have that. You don't have that reverence for it as you would like a Harry Potter or the next panel that we got to go to. Or what our final
panel was. Yeah,
so we'll get to that in just a second. But it was still cool to see, like, people. I love people that have passion for things, and I love talking to people that are passionate about stuff. I will entertain that all day, even if it's something that I'm not completely fascinated in myself. Just to hear people speak about things with passion and stuff that they get a lot of enjoyment out of. I love having conversations about that with people. It's part of why we're doing this podcast to begin with, right? But it was really cool to see, those people in those movies that give back to their fan base like that, and was a very entertaining panel to watch. And had we not gone to the Hardys, I would have stayed and like enjoyed that one too. So it was cool that we at least got to catch the back end of it.
Yeah, and the last panel we attended on that day was the highlight to me and to probably both of us. Because at the Cincy Comic Expo, we got the X-Men the Animated Series cast reunion. Well, here they were able to get the 1990 or 1989 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cast. So we got the 4 original Turtles and the original April O'Neil doing a reunion. So cool. So probably the biggest name out of all of them is Rob Paulsen. I mean, if you grew up in the 90s, you know, Yakko Warner, Pinky from Pinky and the Brain, he did so many like iconic voices, and just to see still and hear active. Him and still active, and he was really funny, but he also had some touching, humble moments about the harsh reality of being a voice actor and stuff. Like you're just lucky and grateful to keep working and getting jobs, because it can be very few and far between. And he's actually one of the few, if not the only one of the turtle voice actors that have played 2 different turtles, because he originally was Raph and he returned to be Donatello in one of the later series here in the past, about 10, 15 years. But it's just really great to see them talk about their love of the turtles and what they enjoyed about it, but also gave us a few different stories that we didn't expect to hear on kind of the hardships about being a voice actor and working on that show.
Yeah, hearing their experience about the show and, their love for it, their reverence for it, because several of them have gone on to do a lot of other, notable voice work, obviously. It was incredible to get all of them in the same room to hear their experiences and the love and the reverence that they have for the Ninja Turtles. We got some really cool stories about their time, and, they were voice actors in a time where not everybody was doing their voice recording at home, so they would all go into the studio together and record their lines together, which I would love to have been a fly on the wall for those voice recording sessions, because now it's all done. You get a job, you record it at home, you send it off, and that's it. Mm-hmm. You don't really know if the project's going to take off or if it's going to, become this iconic pop culture thing that the Ninja Turtles have obviously become. And they got to tell some really cool stories. I think one of the craziest stories that came out of that panel was they mentioned that if they weren't physically able to be there to record with the director that they were working with, they were replaced by a different voice actor for a couple episodes that they couldn't make it. And they mentioned the fact that I remember the voice actor for Michelangelo even mentioned, like, hey, there's a couple episodes where I'm not the voice of Mikey in that episode.
There's Donatello. I know the voice actor for Donatello was saying that too, that there's like 5 or 6 episodes where he's not Donatello.
Yeah, like it's crazy. Now it makes me want to go back and rewatch the entire series to see if I could pick up on, like, if they got somebody that was even relatively close or if I'm just misremembering it. But it was such a cool panel because you can tell that those guys all get it and they all understand, like, they're a part of something extremely special. Like, the Ninja Turtles are one of the most iconic franchises of all time now. Like, it's still super popular to this day, and they got to talk about, you know, their love for it and tongue-in-cheek that they would absolutely all love to be a part of the last Ronin movie, and, you know, got to tell a bunch of stories about their time with it and some of the other things that they got to work on too. But it was very Ninja Turtle focused, and we got to hear some really cool stories about the show. Like, talked about some of their favorite episode arcs and, you know, things like that they got to be a part of. It was so cool, and it was such a wave of nostalgia for us that grew up in that time and so loved that animated series that it was a really cool panel to be.
Yeah, going back to that extreme producer that would tell them if they didn't show up, you're going to be replaced. The voice actress for April O'Neil said she was, like, very sick, like, even got to the hospital and had IV and stuff, and she had to, like, basically pull the IVs out and left the hospital and came recorded and went back afterwards because it was, like, that producer was like, if you are not physically here, you will not be voicing your character. We will replace you no matter what. I don't care who you are in the show. We're going to replace your voice for that episode. So, but I mean, yeah, it would have been amazing to see if there was any footage or if there's anything of the recording session, because you also had James Avery, who was Shredder, you know, Uncle Phil from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and stuff. You had some big, again, I was a teenager to 20 years old before I realized James, because I watched both of them. I watched Fresh Prince and I watched Ninja Turtles, but
never made the connection.
My brain never made the connection that Shredder was Uncle Phil
until we got older. And then, like, I remember going back and, like, watching it as, like, after I'd watched the Fresh Prince and went back and I went on a nostalgia run and watched some old school Ninja Turtles, and I'm like, no freaking way that was Uncle Phil. You can clearly tell when you see it as you're older and more perceptive of those things that it was him. But I was like, oh my God, that's crazy! Like, so cool, so, like, so much fun. Wave of nostalgia hit us.
And they had some good story. They told a little bit about having him be a part of it because he's a massive man, and having that big guy as Shredder and recording, they absolutely loved him and loved working with them, and brought up some nice love to him. It's been over 10, 15 years since passed.
James has passed, yeah, and they showed some love to the voice actor for Splinter as well, which is another legendary voice actor too. So a lot of love for that series, and, you know, just their experience with it. It was a ton of fun to be a part of.
Yeah, as I said, being able to see the 90s cast, we got to hear them do their voices. We got a Turtle Power from all of them as well. Like, it was just a lot of fun, but I'm one that loves to see the behind-the-scenes stuff as well, that you got them talking about, again, mentioning the hardships of being a voice actor and being able to get roles and keep doing roles. We had, you know, the voice of Leonardo. Cam was actually the voice of... There was a very brief time where Snoopy of Peanuts talked, and he was the voice of Snoopy as well. So it was Leonardo and Snoopy, and he talked just about how much it meant, because he was handpicked by Schultz himself. Like, so not only am I voicing Snoopy, I was handpicked by the creator of Peanuts to voice that character. And that was
his favorite.
And that was, like, one of his favorite things he did, because he was handpicked to be Snoopy. Like,
well, then, like, he was obsessed with Peanuts comics, and he got to be the voice of Snoopy.
I loved how he talked about conventions where some people were like, I guess it was mentioned whether talking to people at his table about Snoopy, talking like, Snoopy's never talked. And he's like, well, let me tell you about that, because I was the voice of Snoopy, so I know that's a lie, and that he actually did talk. He was really funny. He got down on his knees in front of everybody. He was really kind of animated and over the top with the panel, which just made it so much fun. But it was just great to see not only their love for what they do, because especially being a voice actor, you have to bounce around a lot unless you're able to get into a series like the Turtles that lasted for so long and stuff. You can bounce around between trying to find jobs, and they were very grateful because I remember Rob Paulson saying very emotionally saying that we really wouldn't have careers or have a lot of stuff that we have if it wasn't for you. Like, you can applaud us and thank us for your childhood, but we thank you because you're the ones that made it happen, because you tuned in, you bought the toys, you followed and paid attention, you gave us those jobs that lasted for many years. Like, we're grateful for you all to helping and supporting the show. It was really cool to see because you can get blinded by a lot of people, even some voice actors that you've seen in 100 different things, but they're probably the hardest working and struggling actors out there because they may get an episode on this show or 2 episodes on another show or 3 episodes or a season here or there, but they've got to bounce around a lot, and all the voices that they end up doing of having that repertoire. Like, I was very grateful to be able to go and talk to Billy West, which was really fantastic. If you don't know his name, you know his voice because he is like 3,000 voices on Futurama, but he was also Ren and Stimpy, Doug. Like, he was every Looney Tune in Michael Jordan's Space Jam film. Like, he is an iconic voice actor, and he unprompted went through like 4 different voices. He was Zoidberg and Fry and Ren and Stimpy, and he went through all, and then that just amazes me seeing these voice actors who can switch between, because some of their voices are just them. It's their normal voices. They may pitch it up or pitch it down a little bit, but it's their main voices. But especially voices that are not, because Billy West's main voice is Fry, just turned up a little bit more. But to hear Zoidberg and Ren and Stimpy and have him just switch, it was so effortlessly. I started fanboying a little bit there for a second. I caught myself like, oh, wow, like he's just effortlessly going through these voices. Like, it just amazes me. Like, I've played with my kids of doing various voices and being silly and everything else, but I try to do accents, and I'll go from British to Australian to Russian to something else, like not even meaning to. It'll just slip, and the control of the voice. I mean, he's been doing it for a very long time, but that control to change voices on the fly. He had a like 4 or 5 character conversation with himself in 30 seconds. And it boggles my mind, the skill that these people have to create these voices and be able to switch to them on a fly. I don't get how they can do that.
I'm so glad you got that interaction too, because that was really cool. I remember just seeing you light up like a little kid when you walked out of that, because I let you have that moment to yourself, because I know, like, I would have liked to have met him too, but I know you were super hyped to meet him. I got to meet Cal Mitchell, who, is notorious for playing, Ed in Good Burger, and was on all that, and just in like another staple of our childhood was all that, which is like SNL for kids. It was so much fun. I love that show back in the day. He was doing photo ops as Ed from Good Burger, so he had the wig on. He was trying to do the voice a little bit. I caught him out of character a little bit with some words I shared for him, but we got a couple funny poses in that I posted on my social media and stuff. That was a ton of fun and a really cool interaction with him. Just a really cool overall experience. We can't thank the people enough at the Lexington Comic and Toy Convention for having us out as media and giving us the opportunity to explore, got some interactions, be a part of some really cool panels. It was a really fun experience. Once again, shout out to all the folks that run Lexington Comic and Toy Convention. Yeah, a ton of fun, really well laid out, spaced out. The only time we really ever felt cramped was when you're moving in between vendors and there's a ton of people in there, but for the most part, it was well spaced out enough that we weren't like super cramped, and easy to move around, easy to find stuff. Like, it wasn't that difficult to try to hunt things down. So a really, really well done job of, planning that convention out and making it a really enjoyable experience for the time we got to spend there.
And if you've never been to it, so we're looking like, I believe it's next March that we'll have the next one. Head down and check out the Lexington Comic and Toy Convention. There's so much for everybody. Comic creators, you had John Romita was there as well, which I don't think we even got near his line to see what it looked like, but that was one that was going to be extremely long and big and stuff, and a ton of great celebrities and cast members and voice actors, some great panels, and moderators did a fantastic job of running everything. It was a great time. we look forward to heading down there again sometime. But if you haven't gone, go check it out. It's well worth your time. They put on a fantastic convention. They have everything so well laid out to be able to find where you need to go to find. The only thing was a few of the pavilion rooms, and it's not them. It's the layout of the venue that they're out. It's a little bit kind of wrapped around the back and the back alley, because you think at a few times, oh, this is ending. This is the end of the hallway. Nope, it goes on around a little bit more, but they put on a fantastic convention. So make sure you go and check out the Lexington Comic and Toy Convention. They put on a great show.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks again for having us. We really appreciate it.
So moving into our film review of this week, we checked out Novocaine. So this is the Jack Quaid action comedy that his character cannot feel pain. It kind of goes a little more in depth into his condition and stuff, but I was surprised more by the amount of depth and layers that this film had, because going into it from the trailers, I kind of spoke to you about it. It kind of looks like Jason Statham's Crank films. Like it's just going to be a wildly crazy, over-the-top action film, which it is. But it has a lot more layers to it. So you have him as Nathan Kane. He's an assistant manager at a credit union, and he's kind of falling for this girl that he works with. But he's a very shy, kind of reclusive guy. His condition has kind of forced him to not really have a lot of friends or not to be very outgoing. And that's where we get a lot of depth. You get a lot of sympathy for his character, because he's kind of had a hard life because of this. He's had to be extra cautious. He talks about different things like where he can't really have solid food because he's afraid he might chew his tongue off, because he doesn't realize that he can't feel the pain, so he doesn't really know that he's doing it. So he's had to live a very different life, and it added a lot more layers to it that made me enjoy this film a lot more than I was expecting to have a fun time with it, but it gave me more depth and layers to it than I was expecting that made me have a lot more fun.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really fun movie. Like I had a good time watching it. You and I were cracking up at several of the, just the absurd, over the top, stuff that they do in this movie. Like, let's not get it twisted. This movie is very brutally violent.
Absolutely,
it has a lot of violence in it, but it also does have a lot of heart that we were a little surprised by. You get enough exposition about his character to see the kind of rough upbringing that you mentioned, that you did get to build sympathy for him. You get the love interest that comes in, and she's a very integral part of the story in more ways than one, as you come to find out in this movie. And, it's very interesting to see the ways they explore his inability to feel pain and how he kind of powers through, because he explains the genetic nature of it, obviously, in a very scientific way that makes sense, right? But you also get to hear the story of, his upbringing with it and him having to learn and adapt with it, how people found out about it and how they treated him because of it, in a very cruel and probably realistic way to think about it. Like, if you hear about this kid that can't feel pain, and, there's going to be bullies that try to pick on him and beat him up because he's not going to hurt, so they can, do that. And it's just awful, just a kind of highlighting ways of how awful people can be. But at the same time, you get a really fun, like, action story that takes place where, the bank, you've seen it from the trailer. The bank gets, held up by these guys dressed in Santa suits. They go and rob this bank and take the love interest hostage. And, that's where the story really jumps off at that point, is him trying to go rogue and go vigilante mode to try to get her back and save her. And the film takes a twist that is kind of predictable, but kind of not. I kind of didn't really see the twist in the movie coming in the way that it did, but it kind of makes sense. Yeah. And it was a really well-executed story. I was surprised by it, because the action is a ton of fun. It's very funny. It's a very funny... I really feel like Jack Quaid has this niche role that he's playing, because you get very much in a lot of ways, a Huey from The Boys in this, in the way that he's kind of this, wide-eyed, happy-go-lucky action, almost like action star at this point, because like he's very much a Huey type in this film, and it's just a ton of fun seeing the over-the-top ways that he tries to stop these guys to get the girl back. It's really a lot of fun.
Yeah, Jack Quaid is really turning into a kind of a Paul Rudd type of actor, and that's not saying anything bad.
That's not a knock.
That's a good thing. Paul Rudd is very beloved and everything. Especially, I talked to you. There's a line where he's being tortured in the film, and he's like, "Oh, that one hurt the most." I'm like, all I could hear was
hear
Paul
Paul
Rudd
Rudd
when he delivered that line. But it's a good thing. He's turning that he can play an action role, but also give you some sympathy and some depth and some heart, and you actually feel sympathetic for his character, that he's going through the stuff, and especially you get the twist and you feel even more sympathetic to him, like he's doing all this stuff that he doesn't realize exactly fully what's going on, and then you finally get that realization, and it does go off the deep end at the end. Like it's like, all right, we've been ludicrous over the top, and then we balance out, and ludicrous over the top. Let's just end it on the absolute most ludicrous stuff that we can do at the very end and have fun with it. But it was a lot of fun. I had such enjoyment out of it. Like I said, the layers added so much more to the film to me that made me just appreciate what they were doing with it. And Jack Quaid does just have that such likability to him. Like you connect and you like the character that he's being, and he, the characters around him, even Sherry, the love interest, they're a little shallow. You don't get a ton on it. The acting can be a little rough at times with some of the other guys in there, but it's Jack Quaid carrying this movie because of his charm and his charisma, but also how you feel sympathetic and you can really connect to his character and feel like, well, I felt the same way about some things that he is, or I feel like I've known those people, and you feel a big connection to him. So he definitely carries the movie. It's not saying everyone around him was bad, but he gave the best out of everybody in that film, and he really was a big highlight to the film.
It doesn't hurt when you have legendary parents like he's got. If you don't know who Jack Quaid's parents are, it's Dennis Quaid and Meg Ryan. He's very much a spitting image of his father that you see a lot of in the facial expressions that he makes. But, he's got the acting chops of both of his parents, in my opinion. Like, he's well on his way to establishing himself as a bona fide, leading front man that he could be. And he does carry the bulk of the weight in this film. But you also have a good performance from Jacob Batalon, who plays Roscoe, who's obviously most famous for playing Ned in the Spider-Man films. He's a lot of fun in this, playing
a lot of jokes at his expense.
You don't physically see him until later on in the film, but he does a fun job playing his role in it as well. But it's one of those that you go in expecting, just this fun, over the top, wild ride, and they deliver on it. I think it met your expectations of it, and even exceeded it with the depth of the story in this too, because you got a little deeper. You got a good job of emotionally connecting to Nathan to want to see him, kind of pull this off and succeed. But you get a lot of that crazy, over the top, violent, absurd, especially at the very end of the movie, how they, resolve things in that way. Just the most crazy way that you can think of to stop somebody. And I won't spoil that ending for anybody, but they did a really good job of telling a cohesive story. There didn't need to be a whole lot of depth to this. You had, the depth was in the lead character himself, but the plotline of the rest of the story is pretty straightforward. Guy falls for girl gets abducted, guy saves girl. Like, that's kind of the thread line that they follow through the formula of the movie. And, it takes some twists and goes some directions that you may or may not see coming, but it does a good job of keeping that thread line throughout the entire movie and wrapped up in a way that was pretty expected for everybody. And I think they did a good job of telling that cohesive story throughout the entire one that didn't really feel like it ever lost its way.
Yeah, and you've got to kind of turn your brain off a little bit to it, because as much damage that has happened, even though we can't feel pain, he's still human and stuff.
Absurd amount of damage.
The amount of just physical blood loss and damage that happened, he should be dead through most of this movie. Like, even early on in the movie, he probably should be dead from everything that's happened to him. But, he's the hero, so he gets the plot armor that allows him to survive these great, really violent things that happen to him, and especially the really violent stuff he uses comedic effect that he gets.
Sure.
You saw it in the trailer where he gets the giant spiked ball in his back, and he's like, "What is this?" Like, yeah, you probably should be bleeding out from that and stuff. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. Even got two side characters with the police officers, and one is, I laughed too much at him, at the male detective cop, because he's playing that kind of standard curmudgeon old cop.
Yeah,
like,
very funny.
Oh, this is the stuff that, why are we doing it here? And why are Santa's robbing the bank? Like, he's kind of giving that kind of,
yes, so funny.
He's dramatic in a comedic way.
Yes.
Like, he's being funny and over the top with it, but he's just like, get out of my way, talkies or something when he goes by the reporters. And
the cop has got no time for anybody's crap.
Doesn't give a crap, but he's also saying, like, just, it cuts to him and he's like being dramatic, but it's that comedic dramatic. And he was a lot of fun in there. Just, he knew what role he had to play in that film, and he chewed up the screen when he was in there.
It was a lot of fun.
But yeah, Novocaine was a ton of fun. Like, yeah, I had a real good blast with it. It is one, like I said, I thought coming in I was going to turn my brain completely off and just enjoy the absurdness, which I did for an extent, but the layers really helped get you connected to that main character and his ploy and everything that he was going through. So it had that kind of surprise element to me that I just didn't expect it to try to give us any depth at all. I just expected from the get-go it was going to go way over the top crazy, and it did end up getting there, but it started off giving us some good connection to this character, so we felt attached to his journey as it went on.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. There's so many over the top funny there's one-liners in there. There's some really funny, emotionally funny moments, some physically funny moments. Just they kept the tone pretty even keeled throughout this entire movie of finding that balance between trying to be serious and trying to be funny. And they walked that line really well, because you could find yourself going really strong one way with losing some of it, or going the other way with losing some of it. And I don't think they ever did, because they got violent and very dark when they needed to, but they kept the levity of it with the humor and stuff at the same time. And they found a really good way to balance both of it in a way that just, it worked. It really worked for this film. I wound up getting a lot of enjoyment out of it, and I'm probably going to rate it higher than I expected to going in, for sure.
Yeah. So in the end, Novocaine was a blast of a film. It was ridiculous, over-the-top, fun action film that also had more depth than we really expected to have, that really got you connected to this character and his journey that he was going on. So I'd probably give this an 8.5 in the end. Like, I had that much enjoyment. It's silly, it's over the top, but like, Jack Quaid carried this movie with his performance, with that connection you get to his character, that made me really enjoy it.
Yeah, I was gonna give it an 8 myself, but you could probably talk me up to an 8.5. It's a ton of fun. It's one of those, if you can just turn your brain off to the fact that a lot of the things that he's physically going through should probably kill him throughout this movie, you'll get a lot of enjoyment out of this, because it does a good job of maintaining, like you said, a fine balance between serious and humor and violence and comedy in a way that just worked and wrapped itself all up. You're not going to get any Oscar-worthy performances out of this. You're not going to gain any new ground, but I think Jack Quaid in this film really solidifies himself as a potential, action comedy leading man, which is given his physical stature, is you don't think you could get, but he does such a good job with that. Like, if you're a fan of him as Huey in The Boys, I think you will love him as Nathan Cain in this, which Nathan Cain, a very funny play on Novocaine, the title of the film, and the nickname that he's given to him by his bullies, but they do a good job of balancing the violence and the humor. It is very violent. This is definitely not a film for kids. Obviously, it's a very hard R rating with the blood.
Even had a few scenes that I was like, okay, I'm not going to watch this happen, especially the torture scenes.
Yeah, it was intense in some spots, but they do a good job of, like you said, cutting that tension with the comedy and the things that really balance it really well. So I think I would give it around an 8 to an 8.5 as well. That, really, it worked. It really worked at the right time. I don't know if I was just in that great headspace when we watched it, but it really worked, and it really holds up, and it might be one of my sleeper hits of the year. I know it's not going to probably do a ton of business at the box office, which is disappointing, because this is a fun one to go sit in the theater and watch, and we're going to recommend that you do that. And I hope that this one gets that cult status. Maybe if it doesn't do well at the box office, that if you're not going to see it in theater, at the bare minimum, watch it on streaming, because we think you'll get a lot of enjoyment out of this one.
Yeah, so Novocaine is in theaters now, and we highly recommend going and check it out. Again, we talked about it in the last episode and several episodes. A lot of films are only getting that 18-day window in theaters before they're coming at home, like Mickey 17 and this one. We recommend going to theater, see both of them. They're well worth seeing in theaters. They were a lot of fun. It was kind of nice and neat having that back-to-back between Mickey 17 and Novocaine, because they were both a little silly and absurd, humoured and had some good action, but they give you a little more depth and everything else than you were expecting. They were some great films. So Novocaine is playing now. Go check it out.
Yeah, and come to our social medias and let us know if you see the movie, what you think of it as well. We'd love to have that conversation with you. But now I want to move us into our TV review of the week, which is Daredevil. We are going along on this journey. Daredevil Born Again. We get episode 3 now. We got the epic first 2 episode premiere that we talked about last week. You can go into our archives and check out last week's episode to check out what we thought about that. But now we're moving the story forward now, and this is all centered around the trial of Hector Ayala, which we know is the White Tiger. We get this just insane story. Like, this is crazy. You get, them trying to defend Hector here, which it feels like all of the odds are stacked against him, but you get them trying to locate, their star witness, who's going to be the guy that was there on the platform with Hector when he, approached these, cops that were trying to beat him down and, get whatever they were trying to get from him. But this is very much centered around Hector and his trial. And this episode is very intense, and I don't want to jump too far ahead to the ending, which is absolutely insane, but we get a really, really, really solid, next episode here, in probably my personal favorite episode of the season so far.
And remember that Daredevil Born Again here, as we go through, we're going heavy spoilers. We're talking about everything. We've waited so long to get this, so we're going to be talking and discussing everything. So, yeah, diving right in. Yeah, I could see this episode being a little mixed among people because it is very much a lawyer courtroom type of episode. You're dealing with the semantics of them trying to get his trial done right, but the judge doesn't want to really listen to anything. The prosecutors don't want to allow them to say anything, and they're just, everyone's kind of, it's stacked against him, as you said. But we're also getting some depth with Vanessa and Wilson Fisk, as we're seeing that their relationship is still really rocky, and we're seeing that he has done even more as he's come back as the mayor, that he's basically shut her down from running the gang, the business that she's been running for so long, and she's not very happy about that. So we're seeing a lot of the gang and the criminal element fighting against each other and going against. We see a semi that's robbed and execution style that's done, and they're going out against each other. But we also get to see Vanessa playing a little bit outside of what Wilson knows, and you get a really intense, interesting conversation between them, like especially that line he delivers of saying, well, don't make me not start trusting you. And that was a threat, but also like, I'm talking to your husband, but I'm also threatening you as the kingpin.
Yeah, like, don't step on my toes here too much. Like, I don't want to get to the point where I don't trust you. It was a very, very intense interaction between them as they were about ready to go into a couples therapy session, which is just, the optics of that are very funny. But yeah, a very intense, serious moment of them. But like you said, this is very centered around the trial of Hector in the courtroom, and they're trying to get the confession out of Nathan, I believe is the guy's name, that is the gentleman that the cops were trying to get at the end of episode 2, that Matt fought them off and let him get away to where they could save him for this trial. But they get him up on the stand, and this is where their entire defense hinges on his confession that, hey, these guys, like, I am a confidential informant, because you get the cops perjuring themselves on the stand saying, we don't know who this guy is, we've never heard of him, and even though they know that he's a confidential informant and all that stuff, but they're playing denial, they're lying on the stand, it's all crazy. They finally get him to the stand, even though they very much tried to not let him get to the courtroom, in a very cool scene where they tried to attack Cherry's van and, abduct him there before he makes it to the courtroom. And in a very wise moment, they did a little switcheroo, and he's not in the back of the van. They get him to the courtroom. But he gets in there, and he folds under the pressure of his own testifying. Like,
only having 30 officers that,
steering you down or just telling you. And he basically says, yeah, I was home all night. I had nothing to do with this. And it throws their defense of Hector in all sorts of chaos, because now they're like, well, this is, our entire defense was hinging on this, and they got to him, like, he was too scared to speak up. Now what are we going to do? And this is where I really get the enjoyment out of it, because you get Matt being the clever lawyer that he is. We already know how great he is as Daredevil, but
he's a really good lawyer.
He's a really good lawyer, and you get to see the really good lawyer come out here, because he kind of goes against the grain, and he, in a way that shocks not only Hector, but literally everyone in the courtroom, including his own partner who's working on the case with him. He calls Hector up to the stand and point blank directly asks him,
"Are you not the White Tiger?"
He pulls out the White Tiger mask, and he's like, "Are you not the White Tiger?" And everybody just loses their minds in the courtroom. They pull Matt and the DA into the judge's office in a really fun interaction. Like, he basically is like, "My bad, didn't mean any no disrespect," but it was really funny. It was really funny interaction they have there. But they go forward, and you see Matt start to build this brilliant defense of him in a very short span of like, hey, here's where we're going to lean into your character because they know you as the vigilante White Tiger. Let's build off that. We weren't wanting to out you like this, but this might be the only way we get to save you from going to prison. And he builds this really beautiful defense centered around like cop statements, and, you know, he gets these confessions from, you know, citizens and cops who he's helped not only save their lives, but other people that they were trying to help as well. And then he throws a couple names out there, and I was wondering if you picked up on this because it perked my ears up when he mentioned it, because he starts throwing out these folders of cop statements. He's got Officer da-da-da, Officer da-da-da, Officer Morales. And then obviously he mentions Officer Morales, which perked my ears up because there's a certain Morales that we haven't been introduced into the MCU yet. But I'm wondering if that's gonna. I want to go on a little bit of a tangent side off on this, just based on that statement alone. We know if you watch Across the Spider-Verse, if you know who's dead, his dad's name is actually Jefferson Davis, not Jefferson Morales. So I'm wondering if that was just a little wink and a nod throwaway to something that they could pay off down the road, or is he going to be Jefferson Morales in the MCU and not Jefferson Davis, who is the father of Miles Morales, the other Spider-Man that we're waiting to see his actual MCU debut, because we have a pretty good feeling that it's coming at some point. They keep teasing around.
Yeah, and Kevin Feige said after Beyond the Spider-Verse, you're going to see some sort of Miles Morales show up in the MCU, but of course they're so still tied with Sony. I gotta feel that they're gonna have to buy that away from Sony sooner than later.
But throwing the name Morales in there just immediately set off my spider senses. Was like, okay, that's not a little throwaway. But getting back to the courtroom in hand, like he's throwing these character witness statements after character witness, just building up the strong case that, hey, if he's doing these things as the vigilante White Tiger, he couldn't have. If he's doing all of these acts to try to save people, is he really going so far rogue as to kill cops and do these things like that? And that's a really strong defense that, you know, in a way really works.
Yeah, I really like the interaction that we had after he's done being scolded by the judge. He goes and talks to Hector, and he apologizes to not letting him know, and Hector gives him the line like, you know, that wasn't your secret to tell. So it's definitely a deep line that he hit him with, like, hey, but I understand that, but it wasn't your secret to tell. Like, that was up to me. And because it boils down to everything when it comes to comic book heroes, like, they want to be the ones in charge of their secret identities, and when they reveal it, other than Iron Man, who just proudly presents, you know, yeah, I'm Iron Man, of course, in the MCU that way. But you get that's the biggest thing with comic book heroes and characters is their secret identity. Like, they don't want people outing them. If they're going to tell people, they're going to tell them. And Matt outed him to the world. So we're going to get, you know, he's had a few people that could out him as Daredevil, but they haven't. But he outed Hector right away to try to save it. Like, he had good intentions, but it's also that back and forth. Like, is that something he really should have done? Even, you know, the emotional reaction of throwing Bullseye off the roof, and now the emotional reaction of outing Hector as a vigilante, even though he wants no one to know that he's Daredevil. But it added a great balance of who he is as a character and a superhero and everything else. Like, well, yeah, I guess I did. I outed somebody as a superhero, as a vigilante, even though I don't want my out there. Like, Fisk knows, and Foggy knew, and Karen knows, and Cherry knows because he saw him on the rooftop in episode 1 without his mask on and stuff. But yeah, he just not carelessly, it was thought out, but just did it without talking to him. And he kind of said, yeah, I'm sorry. He gave an apology, but it's also that kind of, well, did what I'm going to do.
Not exactly thinking about the repercussions in the moment that it could cause for, that we'll get to here in a minute.
It's just a great delivered line to him. Like, it wasn't your secret to tell.
Yeah, it was so good. God, he gave such an incredible performance here, and it's such a shame that we won't get to see, him follow up with that. But, you get through this, and he mounts such a good defense that he ultimately gets found not guilty, and he gets acquitted, and he's on full release. He's free to go. He's a free man. So the defense works, and now you have to wonder what the fallout is going to be coming out of this court decision here, where he gets to walk away. And
Fisk didn't take it very well.
Yeah, Fisk was very clearly not happy. As you know, Fisk has got this agenda against vigilantes that he's trying to push, which is going to be a bigger part of the narrative for the rest of the season, obviously. But he calls in, BRZRKR to talk to her again, even though his other advisor's like, we can talk to the Times about this. He's like, no, give me her. And he clearly delivers his mission statement to BB, where they have a really good interaction again, where they're talking about like, hey, we can't have vigilantes doing this kind of thing. It was a really powerful moment that, kind of sets word out to like, hey, we need to stop these people at all costs, because these aren't the people that we want, walking our streets, that kind of thing. And that message is heard very loud and clear by some, because I don't know, do you want to get to the last harrowing image of this episode, or do you want to wait a minute?
Yeah, we can go and bring it up, because I was going to bring up with that conversation that Matt was having with Hector, where he said it wasn't your secret to tell. Matt was telling me, if you get acquitted, you can no longer be the White Tiger. You have to give it up. You have to stop being, and like, people are going to be looking for you. They're going to know. You've got to lay low, and you've got to do this. Like, you cannot be the White Tiger anymore. This is just, your days are over. You have to stop. But Hector tells him, like, it's not just a suit. It's more than that. He goes into the depth of what actually being White Tiger meant, and with the charm and the powers and stuff that it gives to him and stuff. He said it's not as simple as that. And we get towards the end, and we get we've seen in the trailers of his suit up scene, but it goes in a direction that I don't think either of us was expecting.
Yeah, it was crazy. So you get to see Hector kind of living what you expect from Daredevil, almost kind of a sense like, hey, this is something that's got to be more important than, anything I want for myself. And he's kind of selflessly like, hey, with great power comes great responsibility. I have a responsibility to still be the White Tiger to help people. Mm-hmm. Like, you see him in a very cool suit up moment. Like you said, you get to see him put on the suit, and he's walking out in the streets, and you hear what sounds like a woman in trouble, and he goes to investigate it. And as he's walking up the street, you get to see him in a really cool camera angle shot, in my opinion, him walking up this kind of barely lit, street to go investigate this. And as soon as he gets to the corner of that street, you get a hooded figure come out of the darkness from seemingly out of nowhere, puts a gun to the White Tiger's head and pulls the trigger and kills the White Tiger on site on the street. Just a point blank shot to the head, and very gruesome, very jarring, very violent. And you see the hooded figure start to walk towards the light a little bit, and you get the shimmer of the symbol that we've been seeing very prominently now in the last couple episodes, wearing a vest with the skull of the Punisher logo on it. What does this mean? Is this Frank Castle pulling the trigger? Is this someone acting on behalf of Frank Castle? We don't know what the Punisher's involvement is in this yet, but we've seen very heavy imagery of this skull, from neck tattoos on cops to, graffiti on the streets of the city and, on buildings and stuff. And you see very clearly that iconic Punisher vest on this hooded character walking away. We don't know if it's Frank Castle yet. We don't know what the involvement's going to be, but that's a very harrowing way to end the episode, with the death of White Tiger, and it's somebody, either the Punisher or acting on behalf of Punisher, or is there a cult of Punisher followers that we don't know where this is going yet, but a very jarring and harrowing way to end this episode.
Yeah, I'm going to say my theory is it is the corrupt cops who is wearing that, and they're taking on the Punisher mantle and stuff, and that is what gets Punisher to show up, that gets Frank to show up, that, all right, these cops are killing vigilantes and they're killing people under my name, and that's not what I do. I go after the criminals. I don't go after the heroes. And that's what's going to bring Frank into this world, and where it gets to Matt, and, because we do see a more scruffy, hard-looking Frank, like maybe he's been in hiding and he's been out. That we've also seen that there's a clean-shaven version of him in the show coming. So I think that was the trigger that's going to get him to come out of hiding, to come talk to Matt and see what's going on and see why all these corrupt and dirty cops are using his symbol to do bad deeds, and see the Punisher return.
God, give me John Bernthal on this show now. Like we need.
Hopefully that's episode 4. He shows up.
That's got to be the crux, because now we got a little bit of a tiered episode release schedule in the coming weeks. Like next week we get just episode 4, and then the week after we get 5 and 6 together. So it's gonna be interesting to see how they're paired up and how they play off each other. I'm really hoping we get that John Bernthal appearance in episode 4,
or maybe 5 and 6 is his arc, and that's why they're together.
Yeah, it could be, but it's gonna be interesting to see how they move forward here. Obviously, the unfortunate passing of the actor who played White Tiger, he did an incredible job in this scene, and it's a shame that he doesn't get to follow up on that. But his death is going to have very, very serious repercussions for the remainder of this season moving forward, and it's going to be real interesting to see how it picks up in this next episode. This is one of the things that makes me love that we watch it weekly and hate that we watch it weekly, because I want to
know what happens
now. Yeah, like I wish they would have dropped the entire season, but they're doing a good job of keeping us on the hook, because man, what a way to end that episode. I did not see that coming at all. I figured he may have gotten abducted or something. Like
there was going to be a big fight, and you get to see him, not just instant.
Point blank, like, oh my God, it's jarring. Like, if you go and watch it, it's an you-know-what moment. Like, I said that out loud, very loudly.
I didn't realize you hadn't watched it, but I normally don't try to spoil anything when I text, but I said I just finished episode 3, and man.
Yeah, I hadn't watched it at the time you sent me that, but I was just like, oh my God, that is just insane. Just a crazy way to end it. But they're doing such a good job of keeping us on the hook for the rest of this season. Obviously, we're going to be watching it regardless, but you see some of the criticism, like he's not spending enough time in the Daredevil suit, but that's not the story they're telling here. Like, this is like the absolute, like, you get at the very beginning him very much Daredevil and doing his thing, and you get the tragic passing of Foggy in the first 5 minutes of the show. Like you get him putting away, like, I can't do this anymore. And you're getting that slow realization from Matt, especially with the way episode 2 ended. Like, as much as I want to just be Matt Murdock, I can't not be Daredevil too. Like,
White Tiger's death is gonna have to be something else.
Stuff that's gotta also drive that point home for him. But now you're gonna see the fallout of the death of the White Tiger, this thing against vigilantes, this agenda that Fisk is pushing and how it's going to play out, that's going to eventually force Matt to put, the suit back on again. I have a feeling it's coming probably in episodes 5 and 6 is where you're really going to dive into the Punisher and Daredevil, which I
do think Punisher's going to be a big crux to what's going to push him back into being Daredevil, because he's going to see what Fisk is doing and all these corrupt cops are doing, and he's going to call him out like, why aren't you doing something about it? And Matt's going to be like, well, because of Foggy. And like, you need to like end this and stop this. So he's either going to have to suit up to stop Punisher again, or he's going to suit up and join him.
And it's going to be fun to see which version of that plays out, because I'm perfectly fine with him going in either direction. It's probably going to be both.
Let's get us both.
It's probably going to be both, because he did both before, where he was trying to stop Punisher and Fisk at the same time, where Punisher's probably coming in like, hey, I'll take care of it. You might not like how I take care of it, but I'll take care of it. And
give me their names.
Daredevil's going to be like, oh man, I can't do that. I can't let you do that. And then you can get the fun. I'm so ready. Yeah. I'm so ready for where this is going. But I love the direction of this show right now. You get the depth and the emotional elements of everything Matt's struggling with. You get a really fun scene with Matt and his girlfriend where he's cooking her dinner and they're having conversations. He's starting to open up to her a little bit. She mentions Foggy, and he doesn't completely recoil about talking about it, but you can see him still kind of hesitating to really open up and be vulnerable about how he's feeling about that. But you get a really cool like toast scene with them where they toast to, positive things moving forward, honoring the memory of Foggy and all of that. And
I'm just waiting for that to blow up when she finally, either he walks in or he goes to meet her at her office and Fisk and Vanessa walk out, or whenever he finds out that she is doing therapy for the Fisks, he's going to flip out.
Oh, you already know that's coming, and it's going to be fun to see that little story thread pay off as well. So lots of things to look forward to. Just an absolute dynamite third episode, and I'm so excited for the direction of the show.
It's so far through 3 episodes. It's been a great follow-up to the Netflix series that they're continuing the tone. It is a bit different, but you don't expect it to be the same. It's been several years. You have some of the showrunners and people who have returned after the reboot of it, but it's going to do its own thing and change because it's got to revolve around the MCU as well and what they can and can't do, because we also talked about how Sony still has the full rights to Spider-Man on the TV side as well, that their agreement doesn't really work out to where they could have Spider-Man or others. Like, they could reference him, but they can't really show him. Same thing as Deadpool and Wolverine had to hide references to showing Tom Holland or Spider-Man, because even if they show a picture of Tom Holland as Spider-Man, it counts as an appearance in their agreement and stuff, but they have to work around the MCU a lot more now. So it's going to be really interesting to see how, if at all, by the end of season 1, if we get a deeper integration to the MCU, if that kind of happens in season 2, that we get right before the big stuff kicks off next year.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun to see where this goes forward. But Daredevil Born Again episodes 1 through 3 are available now on Disney+. Come watch those episodes. Come talk to us. Let us know what you're thinking of the show. Join us for this journey, and we're excited to continue covering this every week for the next month or so until this is done, because we have until, I think, April 15th is the last episode of the season. So we're on this journey for another several weeks here, and I'm excited to see where the story takes us.
Yeah, so coming up this week, we have something else from Disney, but it's probably the most controversial thing that's come out from Disney in a while.
Yeah.
It's the live-action Snow White. We've heard all the horror stories of all the reshoots and all the problems and people just not believing Gal Gadot as the evil queen. And there's just a lot of negativity and controversy surrounding this film before it's even come out. We finally have it coming out. They even had just a weird premiere because they didn't allow the press and media to be part of the premieres and stuff. It was only the cast. And yeah, it's been a lot. I'm interested to see. We taking my kids to it to watch, but I mean, this is what the first feature-length film from Disney ever was, Snow White, correct?
Yeah.
And so to have their pinnacle of what really got it started to be so controversial is maybe it changes their approach going forward to these live-action adaptations. We finally got the trailer to Lilo and Stitch, which I'm excited for. It looks like a lot of fun. They've made some changes, and there's people already getting controversy over that, but like, can we at least see these films before we tear them apart too much? I mean, you could go off of what the trailer shows a little bit, but you can't judge the entire movie off of, well, they did this, or they're not including this, or not doing this. Like, you've seen 2 minutes of the film. Calm down a little bit. It may still be absolute garbage, but at least see it before you start tearing it apart.
Definitely a lot of controversy around this film for many, many reasons, but the film's finally here. I'm excited to check it out and talk about it. Good or bad, we'll see what happens.
We also have The Alto Knights out this week, which is Robert De Niro crime film where he is playing 2 dual roles, basically guys going up against each other. The one who basically playing the guy who brings down the mafia, but also the head of the mafia. So he's playing the 2 most crucial parts. Parts of this was filmed in the Cincinnati area, so we've got some Cincinnati actors and other people in that, so I'm excited to see exactly what happens with that. But you've got Robert De Niro plus mafia crime stuff. Like, where can you go wrong?
It's an easy yes to watch. I know we're not covering it, but it's definitely one that it's definitely on my list to check out. It's one of the greatest actors of all time in a mafia crime film. Not check it out and see how good it is.
Another one I want to check out because it's getting some good buzz, but it's not, as far as I've seen, going to be in our area, is Ash. So this is a sci-fi horror film that's getting some good reviews and good buzz about it, so I'm really looking forward to checking that out. Again, we're in the Cincinnati area, but we don't always get it. Maybe when Sundance comes here. Remember, we're still trying to get Sundance here. Yeah. maybe that'll bring some more of these limited films coming to our area for us to see. But there's a lot to look forward to this week, but it's quite different. You have the Disney family film, you have a mafia film, and then you have a horror sci-fi film. So you've kind of got your pick. But again, if none of those meet your fancy at all, check out Novocaine, check out Mickey 70, check out these original fun films that if you want to see more original fun films, you've got to go check out these films in theaters.
Yeah, got to give it a chance in the theaters. Otherwise, these studios will not invest the time or the money into them. And you'll get Shrek 875. That's going to come at some point, I'm sure. But yeah, go check those out, man. You got these original stories. If you're feeling a type of way about Snow White and you don't want to support it, that's fine too. But there's other options out there that you can give your time and money to kind of support other films being made that aren't your tentpole blockbusters 18th sequel of a project you've already seen before. So if you're very much against that, go check out some of these other films and give them a chance. You might find something you really enjoy.
Here's one film we pushed for people to go see, but it's getting that 18-day window, is Last Breath. So Last Breath is going to be on demand this week. Dropping on March 18th. That's 18 days after it came out. So it's got that it's go back in our archive, see what we thought about it, but it was a fantastic true story film that was really well done and we really enjoyed. But it's based on a true story. So, but it was an original film overall here that deserved to be seen in theaters, but not a lot of people are going to see it because of that 18-day window. Like we talked about how the AMC president and stuff wants to change. Like we do need that change. 18 days for these films are just not giving enough time. Like Mickey 17 will release on March 28th, I believe, on demand. So that's another 18 days after that came out. They're just not giving it time. They're saying it's already going to be $100 million loss for them. But if they actually gave it more time in theaters, would it be that big of a loss?
You never know. Sometimes these movies take time, and you gotta make the time to support these things. These are very crucial films to go support, and you never know. You might wind up really liking it. I love hearing about people finding out films after the fact, but I also get disappointed about it because it's like, man, if you just gave us time in the theater, we could get more stories like this. Give it a chance. Like, go see it on a cheap day. Like, if you have a $5 Tuesday deal at your local theater or wherever you get your cheap ticket days, go support it on a day like that. Go take the family out on spend $20 on a movie. I can't stress how important those movies are to support enough.
Yeah, we also have on March 18th is the latest DC animated film with Batman Ninja versus Yakuza League. So we've talked about a lot how, Marvel has been the kings of the live action for a while, and we'll see if that changes with Superman and what's coming from James Gunn's DC. But DC has been far ahead into and across the Spider-Verse of doing animated films. They have been the kings of it. So, yeah, we've got Batman Ninja versus Yakuza League on March 18th. And we also have one that we talked about a few weeks ago, and it's already out on demand as well, as a Daisy Ridley film, Cleaner, which we didn't have showing anywhere near us either. So it looks like it might be fun, but we just didn't have any way to watch it. It's just, are we throwing too many films out at once where none of them are getting the chance to actually breathe and have life in theaters before they just shove them to on demand? Because it didn't seem like it was a bad movie, but one that we didn't really see an advertising campaign for, out for just a couple weeks, and it's already going to drop on March 21st.
Yeah, it's one that we never got a chance to check out, but now that it hits on demand, just because it wasn't around to check it out in the theaters, definitely want to check out and see.
Yeah, we got a couple interesting streaming films coming out. So we got Tyler Perry's Duplicity. That's a Cat Graham, Megan Tandy drama. That actually looks pretty interesting from the trailer seen on, but I've only seen the trailer once, so there hasn't been a whole lot of advertising behind it. That will be out on Prime Video. And Odessa, which is a Sadie Sink music drama, that will be out on Hulu. Both of those drop on March 20th. So the Odessa one is one I've been looking forward to since I've seen the first trailer on that. But both of them seem like they might be some decent quality films on streaming. But again, as we've talked with Apple TV and everything else, a lot of these streaming properties just aren't getting the advertising behind them that they probably deserve or need to have.
And you got the Sadie Sink is a hot name in the news circuits right now. I know we didn't really talk about it, but her getting cast in the MCU in the next Spider-Man film is going to be.
Is she Mary Jane?
Crucial.
Is she Jean Grey? Is she
Gwen Stacy?
Gwen Stacy? Because there's that running joke because of through the Sony Spider-Man and everything, they hired redheads to be Gwen Stacy through everything because you got Emma Stone and you had Bryce Dallas Howard, both redheads who went blonde. Are they doing the same thing here, taking a redhead and making her blonde for Gwen Stacy?
We'll see. That's to be determined. I'm kind of hoping it's the Jean Grey route and we get the younger up-and-coming X-Men, but we'll see the route that goes. But that's going to do it for this week's episode. Once again, can't thank you enough for continued support. Come to our social medias. Let us know what you're watching and what you're getting enjoyment out of. Come talk movies and shows with us. We'd love to have those conversations with you. Coming up next week, we are going to be reviewing the live-action Snow White film, as well as Episode 4 of Daredevil Born Again. Until then, I'm Josh. He's Brad, and we'll see you next week.